Welcome in on this Monday as we let people come in, arrive at the stream. Be sure to hit the like button, hop down into the chat, get involved. We have got a lot to talk about. An incredible weekend of football, a weekend of football that all I kept hearing before the weekend was here. It was how this wasn't a very good weekend. This is the lackluster weekend. If you could miss any weekend of college football, this would be the one. And I don't think you wanted to miss much from this weekend because there were a ton of interesting games. We've got to talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide, who obviously have a problem. And we need to start that off with a little bit of a callback. We then need to talk about Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes pulling it off in a close game, but an absolute nail biter, one we need to break down. We also need to turn our attention to Billy Napier and the Florida Gators winning a game that not many people had them winning. In fact, I think the vast majority of people out there, including myself, picked the Tennessee Volunteers to come out of that game victorious. Nonetheless, it's Florida. We also need to ask the question, is Oklahoma underrated? Because though they haven't played a team that you really look at and say that's the team that can test them outside of SMU, and we'll talk about SMU, the Oklahoma Sooners have looked really good. Are they underrated? All things we have got to get in here today. Guys, as you're coming in here, be sure to hit the like button, hop down into chat. And before we really dive into this and hit our first topic, be sure to go over to homefieldapparel.com. Use code ATTS15 for 15% off your first order. They truly do believe they truly do have what I believe to be the best collection of fan apparel, and they have the best vintage logos. See, this is what happens when you do it live. You get the mess ups. And we have some boomers in the chat. We have Shadow in here throwing the horns up. Good win, Shadow. We're going to talk about Texas. And we have Lucian throwing in the Roll Tide. Lucian, I'll be on the Bleacher Report app, 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, as we talk about Alabama's quarterback and offensive problems. But that's exactly where we're going to start right now. And we're going to start off today's episode of Through the Haze with a little bit of a callback. Because if we go back to week 0, whenever I talked about USC, we got into this whole analysis about how whenever you're playing a San Jose State and you're USC, you don't really want to learn anything. Because if you learn something in a game where you play a San Jose State and you are the vastly superior opponent, we're probably learning things that are not conducive to success. Well, fast forward to Alabama USF. That same analysis comes right back, and it absolutely applies to Alabama. You were taking on an opponent that you are not only vastly more talented than, but an opponent that has had no semblance of winning football in years. On top of that, the best two weapons from that USF team, they were no longer there. Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn Jr., they're both at Colorado balling. And this is a USF team that took Alabama the distance. Now, there are some parts about Alabama's team that I'm not really concerned with, namely parts of that defense I think are doing their job. But whenever you have an offense that's not even coming close to holding up their end of the bargain, your defense can only hold out for so long, as we saw in the Texas Longhorns game, where that was a game up until the fourth quarter, and Texas ran away with it. Because the defense had done all they could for 3 quarters against Steve Sarkisian and the 5-star talent that the Texas Longhorns had. Luckily, USF is still trying to figure out how to play a winning brand of football, or Alabama could have been in a real bad spot in that game. So let's really start breaking this down. Let's start with the offense, because that's obviously where the questions arise from. And when I talked about this game on Friday on the Bleacher Report app, or Thursday, on the Bleacher Report app, one of the things I was talking about was I didn't buy into the narrative that Jaylen Milaro was the biggest problem in the Texas game. I didn't think that you could argue that he played a perfect game, but that's beside the point. I thought that you could point to other things that were much more problematic than Jaylen Milaro. You had an offensive line that didn't give him any time to start throwing the football, going through his progressions. They weren't able to play a consistent brand of football. At the time, we didn't know if that's because the Alabama offensive line wasn't good or if it was because the Texas defensive front was that good, because we talked about that Texas defensive front. Fast forward into USF, we know the Alabama offensive line is not that good. All this talk about being bigger than the average NFL line, yeah, they move like it too. It's tough to watch that offensive line try and do pass protection. Now, when they get into a rhythm, they can run block decently well. I'm not sitting here claiming that it's an offensive line that's going to bring home awards, but I'm saying that they are at least semi-competent in run blocking once they get into a role. They're able to move guys off the line. But in pass protection, it's real hard to watch. And I get it with Proctor. He's a true freshman. So true freshmen, they're going to struggle, especially when you're going up against talented guys, blue chip prospects. You're going to take your lumps. But at a certain point, you have got to do something to help out your guy. And it begs the question, what does Alabama have behind him at that left tackle position? Now, one thing we talked about leading into the season that was really interesting is that it's not surprising to see a guy like a Caden Proctor start as a freshman for Alabama. But typically, and not all of the time, but typically you see them slide into guard and then move out to tackle so that they get acclimated. I think this was a circumstance where we're seeing Alabama has had some misses on the recruiting trail. And I know that might come as a surprise because you look at some of the players they've had come in and they're very highly rated, but they have not translated, which is why we always talk about star ratings are not the end all be all. You could evaluate a prospect in your own camp settings. They be a 5-star guy. You think, wow, they were really good. And then when it comes to it, they're not the guy you thought they were. It's happened time and time again, and it's not an Alabama exclusive thing. We can talk about 5 stars all across the country that were with great coaching staffs, and it just didn't click. It's an unfortunate part of the game. But the biggest issue coming out of that Texas game wasn't Jaylen Milaro. Jaylen Milaro missed some throws. I went back. I was able to get access to the All-22 film, and there's a lot of learning on that tape. There's a lot of learning because the wide receivers were in much better positions when you go back and watch that All-22 film than I had originally thought. There were opportunities in that Texas game, but they weren't taken advantage of. So they moved to a new quarterback. And that was interesting, to say the least. Whenever you move to a new quarterback, you're inevitably gambling. Quarterbacks are a position that they need to come in and foster confidence in fire. In fact, if in a perfect world, you would have your quarterback battle settled into spring, into fall. That way the quarterback knows I am the guy. I'm the guy that gets to move forward taking these reps. That didn't happen. Now, look, I said in a perfect world. Rarely do we get perfect worlds in football. That's the game. So if you don't have your quarterback battle figured out in spring, no big deal. If you don't have it figured out in fall, you'd like it to be figured out, but it's not the end of the world. When you get into game 3, and it becomes very clear that your offense has no identity, it's a problem. And a bigger head scratcher to me than Jaylen Milaro not playing was the fact that Tyler Buckner was the guy they called after Jaylen Milaro. I don't think it takes a football savant, ladies and gentlemen, to come out of that game having watched it, and I don't like to do this, but I don't think it takes a savant to look at that game and realize one of those guys is not an Alabama quarterback. I don't think it takes a lot to realize that. It was as bad of quarterback play as I've seen in a long time. In a long time. So then you go to Ty Simpson. Well, Ty Simpson, God bless his soul. I mean, he had some moments, but the offensive line doesn't give him any opportunity because they are all out of sorts. Now, coming off of that USF game, there was news that there was a players-only meeting. We'll see what that means. But guys, I have to be very honest with you. I said this before the season. For those of you that have been around, Eric, Van, Brock, I know y'all will have heard me said this. It was a show me season anyways for Alabama. The talk, it's fine, but you got to show me this year because all I heard last offseason and I bought into it, which is why I'm sitting here like a scorned ex. I bought into the offseason hype last season. Oh, this is an Alabama team that they feel like they have it figuring out. Bryce Young is back. Will Anderson is back. We feel like it's go time. That was the most discombobulated Alabama team I've ever seen. This one might give them a run for its money. But all we heard was that they're pissed off. Well, they're not pissed off enough, clearly. And I've heard 18 different reasons as to why Jaylen Milaro didn't play that game. And I'm not here to disclose any of them. But one of the reasons I did hear, one of the reasons that's more public, which I think we can talk about, was that Jaylen Milaro didn't respond well in practice, that he didn't have a good attitude. And I'm not saying that's not the case because I wasn't there. But you're going to have a hard time convincing me that the young man who ran out onto the field when Alabama found success on offense, Jaylen Milaro, that was the most fired up for his team, even though he got benched, you're going to have a real hard time convincing me that's the one with the attitude problem. And you know what? If he is the one with the attitude problem, the rest of the team needs his damn attitude. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem is that the rest of the team doesn't have his attitude, because there was one guy who was more fired up than anybody else whenever Alabama found success, and it was Jaylen Milaro, the guy that now you're telling me was benched because he didn't respond well. Maybe he didn't practice well. Maybe that's the truth. But part of the article that I don't know is true or not, because once again, I'm not there, but I just have a hard time believing, is people saying, well, it's not only that he didn't have a good attitude. He looked like he had the best attitude on the field on Saturday. And if you're asking me, I think the team could do something from all having his attitude. You mean to tell me the player that got benched that's sprinting onto the field to go congratulate Ty Simpson for his great pass, his great drive, his touchdown, that's the kid with the attitude problem? Well, then what the hell is going on with the rest of the team? Because they're sitting there with their hands under their ass. And you're trying to tell me that that young man is the one with the attitude problem. I'm going to call cap. That makes no damn sense. So we knew that the offensive line was a problem, but another problem was the offensive coordinator. And guys, I was someone who was excited for Tommy Rees, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when I watched Tommy Rees at Notre Dame, I saw more creativity out of the offense than Bill O'Brien had. Now, that's not saying much. Bill O'Brien ran a pure pro scheme. Pure pro scheme. And we knew it wasn't a scheme that would work with Jaylen Milaro, because it was barely a scheme that worked with Bryce. And I know someone can come in here and say, but Bryce won a Heisman, but Bill O'Brien was not the issue. Why is it that the offense was most efficient when everything broke down last year and the year before that? Why was it when everything went off script, that's when the offense was at its best? That's not giving me reason to believe in the offensive coordinator. So I was excited for Tommy Rees. He's a younger guy. Brian Kelly tried to get him, and Green, I don't know that that's the case, because they did, if I'm not mistaken, they did put in a matching offer. So I don't believe that's the case. They tried to keep him. Not only did Notre Dame try and keep him, Brian Kelly was trying to lift him. So the guy is someone that other college coaches have wanted. A lot of other college coaches have wanted to get this guy. Well, he comes to Alabama. And I knew the first game was going to be a bit of an experimentation game. So we saw a few different things. We saw a few different sets from that first game against MTSU. Alabama found some offense, struggled, and then found their rhythm with Jaylen Milaro going into the half before they'd switched quarterbacks. Now, I was talking with several guys that I trust their opinion on college football as much as I trust anybody's, namely one of them being Texas Homer. That guy and I, if we get an opportunity to talk on the phone, it's going to be a 3-hour conversation. That's just typically what it is. I don't disagree with you there, Green. If he was available, he'd have been a much better hire. But I'm not saying it's gospel, but I do think I read that they tried to keep him. So just something. We talked about this during the Texas game. You had one offensive coordinator that had a 5-star quarterback. You had one offensive coordinator that had a dual threat guy that you knew was still developing as a pocket passer. One offensive coordinator relied heavy on RPO concepts where he put a true freshman safety in a bind. He made him make a choice. I'm going to show you something and you have to choose. Are you going to step forward or are you going to stay in your coverage? And whatever he would choose, Sark had told Quinn how to attack. Oh, so you're going to step forward to stop the run. We're going to pass it right over your head. You're going to stay in coverage. We're going to go underneath. That was Steve Sarkisian's game plan for a former 5-star. Quinn Ewers' first pass was a screen because Sark knows he has to get Quinn in rhythm. Jaylen Milaro's first pass against Texas was dropping back and reading a defense. If you look and the opposing team's brilliant offensive mind has a 5-star quarterback and he's not asking him to read a defense, and you're asking your project quarterback to read a defense, there's probably something wrong. So quarterback was not the biggest issue for Alabama. Far from it. And now we're in a position where even if you're someone who came out of that game thinking, oh, Ty Simpson in the passing, Ty Simpson got sacked 5 times because the offensive line is super inconsistent. Do you know what that tells me? You need a mobile quarterback. You need a mobile quarterback. You've got to have that mobile quarterback to give the offense a spark. And actually, Alabama's wide receivers this year, they're playing better this year than they played last year. I mean, when I'm looking at them actually getting separation, I'm wondering, where was this last year? I think the thing that hurts, and this is what I will end this segment on, the thing that hurts is that this offense Alabama is running looks like it was an offense that they would have ran with Bryce Young at quarterback. The problem is as a coach, you are inevitably a teacher. And as a teacher, it is your job to tailor your lesson to the students. It is not your job to make the students conform to the way you teach. That's not being a good teacher. So Tommy Rees, it's time to be a good teacher, my guy. It's time to buck up and be a good teacher and stop asking the students to conform to what you want to do. You have got talent everywhere. When you asked Jaylen Milaro to run the football, when you had Alabama running the football against that really good Texas front, they were doing good. It's when you went 5 wide. And then Texas got into a position where they just started blitzing because they knew that they weren't going to run Jaylen Milaro. They knew that he would be a little bit hesitant to make some throws. They knew they could make him uncomfortable. And we went completely away from the running game. So Tommy Rees, it's time to be a teacher. And part of that is tailoring what you do to the personnel you have. I think this is an Alabama team that still has something. Now, when I say still has something, do I mean national champion? As of right now, absolutely not. No. They have to show more than one game. No, the rest of the season would have to be superb. And we haven't seen that so far. But I still think it's a team that's talented. Because I did see a team that during sequences was every bit hanging with the Texas Longhorns. That was a game. That was a battle. That was a great game through the first 3 quarters. Genuinely, ladies and gentlemen. The more I go back, rewatch that all 22, everything, first 3 quarters of that game, spectacular. Spectacular. But there has got to be a change. Now, Stubby, I want to ask you about this. Bama might have messed up with its QB recruiting. I'm interested in what you think there because I think they have the number 1 quarterback in the class right now. I know Dylan Raiola is tabbed as the number 1, but Julian Sayin, I think he has every bit of an argument to be the number 1 quarterback. Isn't it the job of the teacher to teach? Exactly. So you've got to tailor the way you teach so that your students can digest the lesson. Not to be concerned about who's learning. Well, then you can't effectively teach if you're not concerned about who's learning. Those 2 points don't stand Those 2 points can't carry water at the same time, Stubby. If you are a teacher and your job is to teach, inevitably you must then be concerned about who's digesting your lesson. Because if you are teaching to a style that is not conducive to success for your students, you're not being a very good teacher. And that's what we're seeing right now. I have no idea. Now, Josh Pate had a great take, as always, guys. You know what it is. When Josh Pate says something, it's usually great. He had a great take, and he said he felt like it looked like the team responded to Jaylen Milaro being benched. Because something that I've said, something that he has said, we have both echoed each other since Bryce went to the draft. As much as Nick Saban wants to, and guys, you will remember this rant I went on. Thomas, I know you were here. Chicken, I know you were here. Green, I believe you were here. Lucian, I know you were here. So you guys can back me up on this. What did I say before we were talking about Alabama's actual season, when we were talking about the quarterback competition? Because I rarely talked about it. I said what Nick Saban wants is for one of these guys to be undeniable. Nick Saban doesn't want to have to pick a quarterback. Be undeniable. And part of being undeniable is that the team will pick you. I think the team picked Jaylen Milaro. We'll see what happens against Ole Miss. We'll turn our attentions to that game on Wednesday. But right now, Alabama needs a lot of help. Let's call a spade a spade. I said before the season it was a possibility that they lost 2 games. I said that I thought that they could be a 1-loss team, though, and I ping-ponged back and forth. Well, if they keep playing like this, I think they'd be very happy to come out of the season with just 1 more loss, to be very honest with you. You keep playing like this and you keep toying with fire, I think you'd be very lucky to come out of the season having played a Texas A&M team who's discombobulated but has got as talented of a front 7 as anybody, specifically along the front. I know they haven't showed up to their status. They always play Alabama tough. Alabama has to travel to that stadium, and Alabama can't block anything right now. You got LSU. Jaden Daniels looks fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Unbelievable. You got Tennessee. That's a rivalry game. You got Auburn. That's a rivalry game. You got Arkansas. Arkansas just took a tough loss to BYU, but they also didn't have Rocket Sanders. I don't know that helps because I think Alabama's rush defense is actually pretty darn good. Yeah. Like Texas had that one sequence where it was really good stuff running the football to end the game. But that was a tired Alabama defense who Steve Sarkisian had been beating up on for 3 quarters, and Alabama had really asked to win that game. Steve Sarkisian called a beautiful game. He had them so discombobulated that got that rushing attack to where it was at. I don't know that Rocket Sanders alone will beat Alabama, but KJ Jefferson's a talented guy. He's an experienced guy. So we will see. Their defense will keep them in. I completely agree. Green. Jaylen Milaro, I think, is the answer. I don't think that there's any more conversation to it. If the offensive line is bad, he's the only guy that provides you any sort of relief. Now, we're going to go ahead and move on. I thought I had these panels already done. So, Colorado State. Now, when was the last time y'all stayed up until 1 o'clock in the morning to watch a Colorado game? Because I can't tell you. But that game was electric. And don't get me wrong. Coming out of that game, there's a lot that Colorado is going to have to improve on. We knew this coming into the season. We knew this going into this game. Colorado is by no means a perfect team. The reason why you're hearing so much about them through the media is not because I think a lot of outlets, a lot of publications are picking them to win a national championship, because I don't think a lot of people had them at 3-0. I think a lot of people had them at 1-2 right now, 2-1 at best, yet they sit at 3-0. So it's been an impressive debut for Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes, because in a lot of ways, you're talking about a team that some of these guys haven't played together for 5 months. Some of them came in during the summer transfer period, and they're already gelling like a team that's been together for much longer, which is a testament to coaching. And that's what's been so impressive, at least from me. When I'm talking Colorado, the coaching has been what's so impressive, considering that's a team that you just assembled to the transfer portal, and they're playing really well together. But there's a lot you can learn if you're Colorado coming out of that Colorado State game. One, Colorado State was there every minute of that game to play and was so undisciplined, it became painful to watch. And this is coming from somebody that watched Alabama get 17 penalties multiple times last year. It was difficult, especially in overtime when you had Kamara for Colorado State, who, by the way, played a hell of a game up until that moment. And one moment doesn't define your game, but it was a big moment. You got the two penalties back to back. That was tough. That was tough. Colorado State put themselves in position to win this game time and time again and couldn't get it done. Now, part of the story, right? If we're looking at this like it was a book, part of the story is Colorado State shooting themselves in the foot and really creating opportunities to win. But do not be disenfranchised into believing that part of the story is not also about a Colorado team that hung around. A Colorado team who had a few plays that were just wild. The interception, right? Just a wild play. The Travis Hunter fumble. That Colorado team never stopped fighting. And that was a Colorado State team. They felt like they were going to blow out. And sometimes when you get into these games, guys, where you think you're going to blow out the opponent, you will mentally beat yourself before that clock hits zero. Because you'll tell yourself, we were supposed to win. We were supposed to win. This was supposed to be easy. I keep throwing everything I have, and they're right here in front of me, ready to go. If I knock them back down, they get right back up. Sometimes that can be defeating. That can really be defeating for a young team like Colorado, where these guys are still learning on the fly together, and they're still learning how to win as a unit together as Colorado, right? Some of these guys came from programs where they were already winning. So don't think I'm meaning that the individual players or the coaches need to learn how to win. I'm saying the Colorado Buffaloes as a collective are still learning how to win. They haven't been together a year. So there's a lot out of this game. You're Colorado, you can work on. There's definitely a lot you can improve on. You've got to develop a rushing attack. And I haven't seen two running backs that I really thought we would see make an impact for the Colorado Buffaloes. One, Kavosiey Smoke. Two, Alton McCaskill. I thought both of these guys would be names they hung their hat on. Now, I knew Dylan Edwards would be a dude. But I always thought that Dylan Edwards and Kavosiey Smoke would be thunder and lightning, right? You have the big bruising back who can go in there and get the job done. And then you have the back that's change of pace that is going to make every defense pay. We just haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen Alton McCaskill either. And Alton McCaskill is a guy college football fans have been waiting a few years to see. Burst onto the scene at Houston as a true freshman, running for just shy of 1,000 yards, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I haven't checked to see how many yards he ran for in months. I believe it was 992 at Houston his freshman year. It was some 961. I apologize. In 2021, he had 189 carries, 961 yards, 5.1 average yards per carry, 16 touchdowns, 113 yards through the air, averaging 5.4, 2 touchdowns through the air. He was a true freshman. We haven't seen Alton McCaskill yet. He's a very gifted player. Stands 6'1", 200 pounds. So he's a big dude now. He's not a slight dude. But that Colorado rushing attack has got to come together. Shedeur continues to impress me. And what I mean when I say that is you could tell there was some frustrations during the game because of how Colorado State was playing, but he remains so even. He remains so even in his play. Now, there was extracurricular that you don't want to see. That's got to get cleaned up. You don't want to see that. Right? Because you might do that to somebody else and they'll grab your arm and flip you on your head. So some of the extracurricular on both sides. You can't have that. But it's also football. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be offended when I see extracurricular activities on a football field. It's the game of football. You're going to have some of it. Does it need to be cleaned up? 100%. 100%. No doubt. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be some nun. All right? My two favorite sports are football and fighting. So it is what it is. There's a lot you can learn from that Colorado State game. Now, when we go for 2 weeks, now we're going to see who Colorado is. We're going to see exactly who Colorado is. I don't particularly have them beating Oregon or USC. Let's be honest, right? At the end of the day, Oregon's vastly more talented. USC has got an offense that I don't know that you can keep up with them if you're Colorado. I just don't. Like, don't get me wrong. I think Colorado is going to get theirs. I don't know that you can keep up with USC's offense. I think Colorado will score. But you're talking about an offense that, I mean, they can go and score at will against anybody that we've seen so far. And Oregon is just a defensive-minded team. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that. But I'm interested to see the way they come. The way they come prepared. Let's hit some comments. Bedlam says Colorado is going to start losing because of a lack of depth. They have skill talent, but the rest of the team is less talented with no depth as well. Bedlam, I don't disagree here. In fact, I was even talking about this. I think if we look at some of the starters in Colorado's front seven, there are even guys in that front seven that you like that are really good football players. And they're more are starting to emerge, but they don't have the depth that you feel comfortable looking at and saying, hey, if our offense is out of sorts, we can rely on our front seven. Now, Travis Hunter wasn't in the secondary for Colorado State, and that certainly hurt them. They're still bringing along Money McClain, but they've got talent on the defense. But I think you hit the nail on the head, my friend. You hit the nail on the head. They have talent. I actually think even on their defensive front, I didn't know that it would work out as well as it has. Jordan Dominic has been playing like a man possessed. Do me a favor, the next time you're watching Colorado, focus in on number 44. He has been playing like a man possessed. He's playing big boy football and doing it frequently, but they don't have the depth. And at a certain point, that is going to come back. But, guys, it's been impressive. It's been impressive what Colorado has done. Like, let's call a spade a spade. They are an impressive team. They deserve the respect, and they deserve the attention, quite frankly, because they're fun. And this is what football is. It's fun. So let's move forward. Florida shocks college football. And who had Florida winning this game? Seriously. Out of everybody in the chat, we have 76 in here. First off, wipe your feet, hit the like button. But secondly, who had Florida winning this game? I didn't. And in fairness, I didn't have this as some blowout game where Tennessee was going to go in there and blow out the Florida Gators. But my big question is I just didn't know who Florida was. I didn't know who Tennessee was. But you felt like Tennessee was the safer bet. Well, coming out of that game, Florida handled business. Yeah, you're right. Josh Pate did. He's one of the few. He's one of the few, Legion, but that's why Pate is Pate. We ran a poll on Bleacher Report. And, we had something like 11,000 votes on this poll on Bleacher Report. And it was something like 69%. And this was after the game. The poll was still, you could still vote. After the game, 69% of people thought Tennessee would win. Now, I'm not saying all 11,000 people that voted were college football experts, but you could see, right? Florida is always a team that keeps receipts. Yeah, Florida, yeah. My thing was, though, Daniel, I didn't know who Florida was. Like, I had no idea who Florida was because it wasn't just that their offensive line looked slow, which, hey, Bama's offensive line is slow. they didn't have any semblance of a rushing attack early in the season. Now, granted, they played Utah. Utah is a very disciplined team. And discipline will win you a lot of college football games. It truly will. It truly, truly will. But I just sat there and I was like, okay, well, not only is Florida undisciplined, I don't know if they have a rush attack, which is really what they wanted to hang their hat on. Graham Mertz, I don't think Graham Mertz, and this was before the game, obviously. Before the game, I'd always say, I don't think Graham Mertz is a bad quarterback. And if I say he's mid, what I mean isn't like the negative connotation that we have now put around the word mid. What I mean is like he's not a bad quarterback. But I don't know that he's the quarterback that when there's 3 seconds left on the game, you feel comfortable trotting him out there to go get it done. There are very few quarterbacks that we can put in that category to be 100% fair now. That's nothing on Mertz. Mertz played his ass off. And in fairness, Mertz played his ass off against Utah. He was not the reason Florida lost that game. You couldn't go back, watch Mertz and say, man, you were bad. He wasn't. He wasn't. And a lot of people are being proved wrong about Graham Mertz. To an extent, myself. Because even though I thought he would be mid, meaning a middle-of-the-pack quarterback, not bad, a guy that you're not going to have lose the game for you. I never thought he would be a quarterback that would just outright lose a game for you through terrible decision-making. But I just didn't know if he'd be a quarterback that would go and win a game for you. He's playing a lot better than I think a lot of people anticipated. Florida is going to be a team we have got to watch because there was talk, whether fair or not, would Billy be on the hot seat depending on how this season goes? This goes a long way into helping Billy Napier. I didn't think he should have ever been on the hot seat, but we also have to understand the Florida Gators are a proud football program. Proud football program. And they expect to be good. Billy Napier just happened to inherit a Ferrari that had no pieces left. None whatsoever. Let's hit some comments and then we're going to move on. Pate ate a little crow this week. I think everybody ate crow this week. And loss. I didn't realize it. Of course, it's still 100%. Conference play is true. Yeah, Oklahoma State. Now, look, Green, this year? Because, wow. Granted, I'm also not very high on Oklahoma State. So I think we probably have extremes there, right? He probably has information I don't have, which is completely fair, right? He's the best. But I'm also not big on Oklahoma State. So I didn't have them anywhere near that game. Especially after the offseason they had. I didn't think Oklahoma State would be anywhere near the Big 12 championship game. Anywhere near it. I don't think we claim the Big 12 anymore. Hey, y'all are SEC. Y'all are just on lease from the Big 12 for this year, Dustin. That's what that is. Y'all are SEC. You're just on lease from the Big 12 this year. Don't get it twisted. Florida still has quarterback problems. What I didn't expect is Tennessee horrible. Couldn't have played a sloppier, crappier game. Thomas, I don't disagree, but I also just don't think Graham Mertz is going to be a guy that's going to outright put you in bad positions. Now, can he get you out of bad positions? Now, that's a conversation I think we can have. But he plays a smart brand of football, or at least thus far he has. But I certainly think you're onto something, no doubt. Oklahoma State and K-State are the teams that worry me. I knew they had issues. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah, Pooh. That's not good. That's not what you want to see. When Sooners a year behind Texas, which makes sense. Which makes complete sense. That Texas staff went in there and started changing, prepping for a more physical SEC style of football just a year earlier. Just naturally a year earlier. I am impressed with how much Venables has done thus far, though. Can't wait to see Oklahoma continue throughout the season, though, because we're going to really get an idea as to who they are. we're learning more and more as to who they are, right? Like, I think that there are some things that we can say are safe, right? Let's talk about this right now. Let's talk about Oklahoma. There are some things that, even though we haven't seen Oklahoma play that opponent, and SMU's good. I don't want to just blow past that. SMU is good. Good football team. We still haven't seen them play that opponent that we've really been like, yeah, that's the team that'll test Oklahoma, that'll really bring something out of them, and we'll get to see. But in fairness, there are some things that we've seen that we can acknowledge. One, the offense is good, right? The offense was good last year. They're good this year. One of the biggest questions I had into the offseason wasn't, does Oklahoma have talent at the wide receiver position? We've talked about this. My biggest question was, who is it going to be? You have Farouk, you have Stoops, you've got a bunch of talented guys that you're excited about, but somebody has to step up. Well, we've seen names step up, and now you have a good problem where you've got guys really trying to fight for that top 3 rotation. That's a great problem to have, where you've got guys and the coaches have decisions to make. That's a good problem to have. Now, they're still learning. They're still making a name for themselves, but you do feel like, okay, Farouk is a gadget guy. He's going to be crafty. Levy's going to utilize him as such. Andrew Anthony, he's just going to be a receiver that gets his. Gibson, Anderson, they're big-bodied dudes. Drake Stoops is as crafty as a slot wide receiver as they come. Petaway is going to be speed he's going to be speed personified. So now you look at the wide receiver room and you feel good, at least to the point where you're like, okay, Farouk is there. Anthony is doing his thing. Gibson and Anderson, they're both stepping up. That's going to be big. The other thing that I think is safe to say is that the defense is better. It's a better defense. Let's call a spade a spade. It is a better defense. How much better? Well, we don't quite know yet. But they're generating tackles for loss. They're generating pressure to the quarterback. The game they didn't generate pressure to the quarterback, that was more of a good call, good scheme by the offense. I'm going to go max protection, and I'm going to get the ball out real quick. We saw Sark do that against Bama. Not the max protection, but I'm going to get the ball out real quick. I'm going to spread your defense east and west, and then I'm going to have Quinn attack north and south. And it was brilliant. It was brilliant. So we're still figuring out Oklahoma. We're still figuring out who the team is. Now, DG has been on this season. You don't put up his numbers without being on. So he's a guy that has really been on this season. The Oklahoma defense is a unit that I feel like we can more confidently say and understand who Oklahoma's offense is. And the reason why I say that is because it was an offense that was a top 30 unit, top 35 unit in almost every category last year. So, I mean, it's an offense that was already good last year. So I think you expected it to be good this year. They had some things they had to replace, but it looks like it's going to be good. The defense we know is better. I don't think there's anybody out there that would argue, no, Oklahoma's defense isn't better than it is last year. It's better. How much better? We're still going to find out. But there's a lot to be encouraged about, right? Like the level of understanding that I think you can see is already there. I want to see a bit more from the secondary. That's an area where I'm still interested in. But, I mean, your linebackers have played well. Kanik is flying around, and Stutzman is just doing wild stuff. He's doing wild stuff. Well, Chris, I think everybody said the defense would be better. I think it's just a product of, one, it couldn't be much worse. And two, yeah, I mean, it couldn't get much worse. It had nowhere to go but up. You returned a bunch of players. You have a defensive-minded head coach. Yeah, I think everybody knew that the defense would. I'll put it like this. If that defense didn't improve, heads would need to roll. Seriously. If Oklahoma exited this year with the same ranked defense they entered it in, jobs would need to be lost. Seriously. Because that would have been inexcusable. So the defense is getting better. It's getting a lot better. They've got guys that they feel good about. Stutzman looks real good. Stutzman looks real good. to be whole. Yeah, the injuries at Cheetah are interesting, but you've got guys. Like, that's the one thing. I think you have more guys that you feel like can play winning football. Oh, for sure, Crossbow. And that's why I said the one team that we can say that we have learned from Oklahoma is SMU. SMU is a good team. SMU is a very good team. That's a really solid football team. The whole OU team has gotten better, but we just don't know who they are yet. And that's not problematic. In fact, what did I just talk about this episode with Bama for? We did a callback to what I talked about with USC. Oklahoma has played teams that they should beat handily outside of SMU. Once again, we understand that game. And they've beaten them handily. If you're playing a game against a team that you should beat easily, you probably don't want to learn too much about your team. And so, in a way, it's good that we're still sitting here, and the only thing we can say is this team looks better. Yeah, this team looks like it's a team that's improving. They look fired up. They look like they're going to make some noise. How much noise remains to be seen, but they're going to be a fun team. That's exactly where Oklahoma's at. But you know what they haven't done? And Chris, this will be music to your ears because it's something my Tide did just yesterday. They haven't answered questions when playing Arkansas State, when playing Tulsa. And that's probably a good thing because once again, if you're answering questions in your Oklahoma against Arkansas State, against Tulsa, they're probably bad answers. Like Alabama. You had questions answered against USF. There was not one question that could be answered against USF that's conducive to long-term success. You got bad answers if you're Alabama coming out of that USF game. You got a lot of bad answers. So Oklahoma, a team that they're definitely a team you've got to watch because they are just absolutely demolishing teams right now. They are just kicking teams' teeth in and looking good doing it. Looking real good doing it. Chris, I didn't mean for that to sound like I was trying to get at Oklahoma or you for saying they couldn't get much worse. It hit me afterwards that probably came off much more harsh than it was intended. It was just the simple fact of you have Brent Venables. You've got Todd Bates. You've got some really, really great defensive minds. I think everybody expected the defense to get better. It's the fact that they are playing confident, sure of themselves. And that's nice. That's nice to find. No, Ryan, 100%, man. He's playing big boy football. There's a list of linebackers right now that I think you could put together. And you're like, man, these guys right here are playing out of their damn minds. And Stutzman's on the list, no doubt about it. He is playing out of his mind. Out of his mind. He's playing a really good season. But I'm also not going to lie to you, Ryan. I'm having a lot of fun watching Kanik because he's learning. You're seeing the mistakes he's making. But you know what you also see? He's so athletic that when he makes a mistake, he can go make up for it because he's a different type of athlete, right? Like you can see it. And I think that's the cool thing about it is when you watch Kanik, you can see the mental side still coming together, which is completely natural. First year being a full-time starter, you would expect there to be lumps, naturally. But the funniest thing is sometimes he'll be out of position, and he's so damn athletic that he's right back in position like that. And it's just kind of funny to see, right? It's just kind of a little funny to see. And Bowen, I love how they're asking Bowen to be in coverage. I think they're bringing about Bowen really nice. Really, really nice. You think Kip Lewis is flat out better? He might be. But I think Kanik's upside is ridiculously high. I think his upside is ridiculously high. Now, Kip Lewis was very impressive. I give you that, Thomas. I remember I talked about Kip Lewis coming off of the spring game. I thought he looked really good. Really good. Like, actually, I made a point to highlight him and Reggie Pearson as being the two guys that I was really impressed with on that defense. So yeah, no, I don't think you're misguided there in liking Kip Lewis. I just also think that Kanik, he just needs to learn, man, because this is one of the things that you got to hate about high school football. He was a guy, Thomas, that was asked to do everything for his high school. And when you're great at everything, you become master of nothing. And that is all well and good when you're in high school, right? Because you're so much more athletic than everybody else that you don't need to rely on technique, any of that. Like Kanik, he goes out there and does whatever he wants on a high school football field because nobody has anything to say to him. I mean, he's an elite athlete, guys. Truly. The guy runs like a 4.4 flat at 220 pounds, 225. I mean, he's very smart, very, very gifted. His athletic ability is there, but you can tell that he's never been a dedicated linebacker. You just got to let him learn. I haven't seen the spread on the Baylor game, Green. I've been rewatching games from this weekend, crying a little bit. Just a little. Not a lot. Just a little. Football isn't played on paper 100%. 100%. Said last year Texas would have lost to Wyoming the way they were playing. You know, Shadow, Texas has entered an interesting position. Because all last year and through the whole Steve Sarkisian cycle, he's been a first-half coach. And now, the second half is where they're really coming through. The first 3 quarters of that Alabama game, I mean, let's be honest, Shadow. Let's be very honest, because I was talking to Homer during that game. Whenever Bama and Texas were still neck and neck with each other going into the fourth quarter, we were talking to each other all throughout that game. And he was like, man, this is where I get a little uneasy because we haven't been a fourth quarter team. We haven't. Well, lo and behold, they're a fourth quarter team. They're really, really, really good in the fourth quarter. Like, really, really good, which is great. But now, Shadow, you enter into a different problem. And it's not a problem yet because we're still so early in the football season and you've had a swing. How do I put this? You don't want a part-time employee to do a full-time employee's job. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Texas has the capabilities to go do big things this season. The defense is there. The defense is really good. They've got a really good front seven. Anthony Hill is already a really good football player. Ford is as instinctive as a linebacker as you'll find. The offense has weapons, and it has Steve Sarkisian. But you don't want a part-time employee being the guy you hang your hat on for the company. You want a full-time employee. Now, the reason why you haven't heard me say this up until right now is because Texas was so much the other way all last season. It's hard to say if it's even a problem, which is why I'm not framing it as a problem. For any Texas fans listening, I'm not framing this talking point as a problem. Because we've always seen Texas be the first half team who loses it in the second half. Now you're right there in the first half. It's not like you're playing losing football in this first half. You're playing a much better brand of football in the second half. Now you want to be a full-time employee. That's how you're going to win. You need to be a full-time employee. And look, you've got the recipe to do so. You got the recipe to do so at every area of the team. Every area of the team. Offensive line, you've got the talent to do so. Tight end, you got the talent to do so. Wide receiver, you're not even playing Nayor. I mean, goodness gracious. You got a dude out there that I think is super talented, and you're not even playing him. Not because I think you're making a poor decision, because you have so many wide receivers. You can only play so many of them. And Sark likes his dedicated wide receiver sets. We've known that about Sark. Right? That's Sark. Texas guys, they're the real deal this year. They really are. It's going to be a lot of fun watching the Red River Shootout because I said before this year, started that I thought Texas and Oklahoma would play twice, I've seen nothing from the Big 12 that makes me think I'm wrong in that analysis. They look like the best two teams. And we'll see. But Texas is impressive. I said this last time, and this will be the last thing I say. Do not blame Sark for the sins of the father. Because he can't control the mess he inherited. No coach can control the mess they inherited. We have to look at what he has done, and personally, I'm pretty impressed with what he's done. Much like Brent Venables to any Oklahoma fans watching. Brent Venables, the reason why I found it ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, that anybody would even begin to think of the notion that he should be fired after year one, because how is he responsible for the sins of the father? He can't control what he inherited. He was left a team with no defense, much like Steve Sarkisian. He was left a team that was in shambles. You cannot blame the son for the sins of the father. So let's move forward, because there's one more talking point I want to get to, right? And it's something that, not OU, SMU, get out of here. Bad. I didn't even put this in the description, so this is one we're thinking about on the fly. Let's get the banner going. We're only an hour in and the banner is here. So as you see, I'm in tip-top form. Thank you for being here. Does the SEC suck? And the answer is maybe. Maybe. Look, I usually fight back on the notion that the SEC just isn't that good. It's overrated because a lot of the times, and Big 12 fans, you'll understand this. What I'm about to say, I think it will hit different for the Texas and Oklahoma fans in here. A lot of the times, the SEC would cannibalize itself. By the time Arkansas or whatever team got to the end, the SEC had already cannibalized itself atop from the other teams that were just far and about better, which would usually be your Alabama, your Georgia, your LSU. Florida sprinkled in there. But I always would push back against the notion that the SEC is overrated for several different reasons. One, because the smartest minds in football, the guys at the NFL, that's where they're going to get their talent. Two, I think much like the Big 12, the SEC would cannibalize itself. And the more and more I started getting acclimated to Big 12 football, the more and more I started realizing the conference doesn't suck. It's not as bad as people want to try and say it is. People used to say that Big 12 was the worst conference, and they've had years where they have been. Every conference has their day. Let's be very honest. But I always would sit there and say, I don't think it's that they're the worst conference. I think they just cannibalized themselves. Like they just cannibalized themselves all year, and the SEC would always do the same. Fast forward to this year. I have no argument to present to all of you that the SEC is cannibalizing itself. No, you're not going to get that from me, because I am only going to give you arguments, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Understand this about me. I am only going to give you arguments that I, at some level, believe in. Right? I think that's part of our agreement here. Right? That's part of this relationship that we have. I'm not going to give you an argument that I don't believe in. And right now, I have no argument to give you saying, no, the SEC doesn't suck. Don't believe your eyes. No, the SEC right now, it sucks. It sucks. Now, am I saying it's going to suck the whole season? No. I think that there are good teams in it. But coming out of week 3, boy, woof. I mean, when you look at the totality of circumstances for the SEC thus far, woof. LSU earns a pass because Jaden Daniels, guys, sensational for the second week in a row. So LSU, they look to be a good team. Arkansas loses to BYU. Missouri beats Kansas State. Good win for Missouri. A&M is all over the place. Alabama is all over the place. The SEC this year has a lot of questions. So when I say, does the SEC suck, understand it at some level it's facetious, right? It's just me being facetious. It's not that they suck. But they're certainly not the SEC that I think we thought they would be. Two things can be true. right? Two things can be true at the same time. And I think that's exactly where we sit. Let's hit some comments. Steven says SEC out of conference games kind of shows they're down this year. Yeah, don't disagree at all. Don't disagree at all, Steven. Green says Bama is going to surprise people and beat Ole Miss. Well, Green, the part of the reason why I was so irate in that USF game is because I'm watching the game, having just gotten done watching the All-22 from Texas. And I'm sitting there thinking this is not the same Bama team that played against Texas, because the Bama team that played against Texas took a bad loss, sure, against a good team, but that's a team where I feel like you can take them out of that game, throw on some film and say, hey, we can make a few adjustments here, and we still have the season completely in front of us. You can't say the same to that USF team that just walked out of that USF game. You can't say that to that Bama team. So this week is going to be big. Because, guys, once again, I'm not going to give you an argument I don't believe in. Coming out of that Texas game, I didn't think that the season was over because I was like, hey, yeah, Milroe had two real bad interceptions. He missed a few throws that would have put Alabama in much better positions. I'm not going to sit here and say anything that would have happened in one circumstance would have won Alabama the game. Remember, when a butterfly beats it, the butterfly effect, right? The game would have been totally different. But what I did see, Green, was opportunities. If you can't generate opportunities, you can't take advantage of them. I watched Bama generate opportunities against a good Texas defense, a very good Texas defense. I watched no opportunities arise against a very, did I say very? Because I do mean very bad USF team. I think they have the ability to surprise people and beat Ole Miss. But they also had the ability to kick USF's teeth in, and they didn't. So I don't even know what Bama team shows up. So we'll see. But I do agree with you, Green. I do agree. I know it sounded like I was ranting right there. I completely agree with you. Ranting at my pain. Nothing you said. Green says Texas defense rated number 1. And like I said, man, they've got every level of that defense. I disagree with that, Rob, because Saban is one of the people that has been trying to get NIL in the game. I think Saban is displeased with the way NIL is being implemented, but Saban is not alone in that, right? Like, I think if you polled every single college football coach, they would probably side with Saban, because what Saban is wanting is what we would call bright lines, right? And bright line, when I refer to that, it's a term I would use in debate and in legal analysis all the time. And it's basically something that says, hey, here's where the line is, and it's so bright that it can't be missed. It's very self-explanatory. The NCAA is giving us no bright lines. So you're not wrong, Rob. You're certainly correct that right now Saban is frustrated with NIL, but it's not the existence of NIL, it's the implementation of NIL. And he's not alone in that. I mean, hell, we saw Lane Kiffin go scorched earth on the NCAA. I can only imagine how many institutions have written letters. Everybody's just operating in the wild west. But you are right. Your overall point here is 100% correct. NIL has brought more parity. No doubt about it. I do agree with you here, and I think there's an argument, Green, that they may have faced the best defense, but the way LSU plays their defense, it's just different. And so I think that there's an argument to be made that you could split hairs between the Texas and LSU defense just because of the way LSU always plays Alabama. But I do agree. I don't think that there's an offense that scares me as much as, well, I say that, Green. I just watched Jaden Daniels go beast mode. But yeah. Oh, 100%, Rob. 100%. And I know I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole right there. I didn't mean to, for me to seem like I was disagreeing with that in its entirety. You're 100% right. NIL has brought about parity. The transfer portal has really brought about parity. I think the transfer portal might be, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I think the transfer portal has an argument to be one of the biggest movers of parity. I mean, you look at how teams have totally rebuilt themselves in the portal. Receiver play has come along great. If the O-line can do their job, we can be. Receivers have been fine for me. Receivers have been fine to me. 100% agreed. Alabama will lose players to NIL and Sanders. Yeah, probably. I mean, that's recruiting. You lose players to everybody every year. That's recruiting. But that being said, Yoda, you're 100% right that the intrigue Coach Prime has there right now, it's unbelievable. You're not wrong, Green. You're certainly not wrong. I think it's impressive for anybody to go out there and do that in live action, even if they played Bishop Sycamore. I agree. Milro's the answer at quarterback. I also think that this is something, Legion. Saban coaching tree. I mean, you look at Kirby at Georgia. You look at Sark at Texas. You look at Billy Napier at Florida. You look at Mario Cristobal at Miami. I don't think you can claim Dan Lanning in the Saban coaching tree because he was just an analyst. So you can't claim Dan Lanning, or at the very least, I'm not going to claim Dan Lanning. That's one Kirby gets full claim on. Even though Dan Lanning was on staff at Alabama, he was an analyst and he really worked with Kirby, but he worked with Saban as well. But if any Georgia fan came in here and told me, but Ty, I feel like that more goes on Kirby's side, I would agree. Yeah, no, the Saban coaching tree, like guys that have been in that building, worked with him, and then gone elsewhere. It's been impressive. Kiffin at Ole Miss, thank you. Both of you beat me to it. Transfer portal, man. Bishop, transfer portal has been wild. He does, but Drums, I don't think that Sark is Sark without Saban. I don't think Sark is the head coach of the University of Texas without Nick Saban. So because of that, we don't see Steve Sarkisian in his current capabilities, in my opinion, but for Nick Saban. So you're not wrong because he was the head coach at USC. But I think if you asked him, if you said, would you include yourself on the Saban coaching tree? I think Steve Sarkisian, I think Sark and Lane Kiffin are two guys that would be the first two. If you said, hey, who would you put on the Saban coaching tree? I just have a feeling like Kiffin and Sark, the first two hands that would just shoot up. I mean, hell, guys, whenever Jimbo says anything about Saban, Kiffin is the first person to respond. Before Saban says a word, Kiffin is there. A head coach for another team. And Steve Sarkisian, you just listen to the way he talks about Nick Saban. There's a very big level of respect. Why does it feel like Why does it feel like this year all four? Oh, yeah, 100%, Steven. 100%. This year's great. This year is fantastic. I mean, this could go any different way. 100 different ways. And it's beautiful. It is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm in my feels. I'm an Alabama fan. We don't look great right now. I'm still holding out hope because I saw some things in the Texas game. But we got to show it against it. But even then, man, it's great. It's great. It's an awesome season. Yeah, those two are great, man. Those two are great. Coordinators could be a problem for Bama. I don't disagree at all, Michael. And like I said to start this off, and this will be how I end it, guys, at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time. So in less than 50 minutes, you can catch me on the Bleacher Report app, and we will be talking about Alabama's quarterback situation. We'll be talking about the offensive problems, and then lightly looking forward to Ole Miss. Would love to have you guys over there if you're not doing anything. But you're not wrong, Michael. And one of the things I stated is specifically about Reese. I like what I saw from Reese before he got to Alabama because he was more creative than Bill O'Brien, and I already understood that you can't use Bob's system with the current offensive show or the current offensive firepower Alabama had. It barely worked with Bryce Young, and it worked because, once again, I have 100 people in here. I need 100 responses. Have any of you ever seen Bryce Young and Harry Houdini in the same room? I haven't. Therefore, I'm not saying Bryce Young is Harry Houdini, but I'm saying that we cannot in full confidence say that he isn't. That's the only contention I'll make there, because Bryce is a magician. You don't have a magician at quarterback anymore. In fairness, there are only so many of them we'll see every 5-10 years, truly at that level. To be playing the best teams in the nation like Bryce did, and to be able to carve them off script. You only see that a few times every 5-10 years. It happens. It happens. We can talk about names, but I mean, it's few and far between. Tommy Rees's offense looks like it would work with Bryce Young. The problem is there's no Bryce Young, and he's not walking back in the door. You're a teacher, Tommy Rees. So teach. Tailor your lesson to the players. That's what all great teachers do. You know, Coach Prime said something, and this is what I'll leave you with. Coach Prime said something. He said, I'm still figuring out how to coach this team. And a lot of people ran with that, right? The Coach Prime detractors ran with that and said, see, he's in over his head. What he meant was this: I'm still learning how each and every one of these players clicks. I'm still learning how they learn. And until I learn how each of my players learn, I cannot teach them at full capability. Because player X does not learn the same way player Y does. So I'm wasting my time teaching player Y and player X the exact same way. I'm wasting my time. I'm not being a good teacher. Say what you want about Coach Prime. Say what you want about him. He is teaching. That is something to say. Sooner Brandon says, I'm no Bama fan. I'll just let you know it's your quarterback. You don't have one. I actually think I can name you two bigger problems, Brandon, than quarterback. I can name you two bigger problems. No, I don't disagree. Quarterback is a problem. Let's be on the same page here. Offensive line and offensive coordinator. That's two bigger problems. We'll talk about that on Bleacher Report. I need to get out of here. Daniel says, you really miss Bryce, don't you? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. If you couldn't tell. Rob says it starts at quarterback. No doubt. No doubt. But it also starts at the offensive line, allowing USF 5 sacks and a half. 5 sacks and a half. USF. That's pathetic. That's god awful. That can't happen. With that, I'm out of here because I'm going to go on a rant again, and then I won't leave, and then it'll be a whole thing. So with that, I'll see y'all Wednesday. We're not going to be here tomorrow. I have some errands to run. We'll be here Wednesday. See ya.